Pachelbel's canon is the name commonly given to a canon by the German Baroque composer Johann Pachelbel in his Canon and Giguet for 3 violins and basso continuo, sometimes referred to as Canon and Giguet in D or simply Canon in D. Neither the date nor the circumstances of its composition are known, and the oldest surviving manuscript copy of the piece dates from the 19th century. Pachelbel's canon, like Pachelbel's other works, although popular during his lifetime, soon went out of style, and remained in obscurity for centuries thereafter. A 1968 arrangement and recording of it by the Jean-François Paillard Chamber Orchestra became unexpectedly popular over the next decade, and in the 1970s the piece began to be recorded by many ensembles. By the early 1980s its presence as background music was deemed inescapable. For the 1970s to the early 2000s, elements of the piece, especially its chord progression, were used in a variety of pop music songs. Since the 1980s, it has also been used frequently in weddings and funeral ceremonies in the Western world. The canon was originally scored for 3 violins and basso continuo and paired with a giguet. Both movements are in the key of D major. Although a true canon at the unison in 3 parts, it also has elements of a chaconne creation. In his lifetime, Johann Pachelbel was renowned primarily for his organ and other keyboard music, whereas today he is also recognized as an important composer of church and chamber music. Little of his chamber music survives, however. Only Musikliche Urgetzung, a collection of partitures published during Pachelbel's lifetime, is known, apart from a few isolated pieces in manuscripts. The Canon and Giguet in D major is one such piece. A single 19th-century manuscript copy of them survives, Muse, Mississippi, 164818 in the Berlin State Library. It contains 2 more chamber suites. Another copy, previously in Hochschule der Kunst in Berlin, is now lost. The circumstances of the piece's composition are wholly unknown. Hans Joachim Schulze, writing in 1985, suggested that the piece may have been composed for Johann Christoph Bach's wedding on the 23rd of October 1694, which Pachelbel attended. Johann Ambrosius Bach, Pachelbel, and other friends and family provided music for the occasion. Johann Christoph Bach, the oldest brother of Johann Sebastian Bach, was a pupil of Pachelbel. Another scholar, Charles Ebrich, investigated a variety of possible connections between Pachelbel's and Heinrich Bieber's published chamber music. His research indicated that the canon may have been composed as a kind of answer to a chaconne with canonic elements which Bieber published as part of Partition 3 of Harmonia Artificioso Ariosa. That would indicate that Pachelbel's piece can't be dated earlier than 1696, the year of publication of Bieber's collection. Other versions are occasionally put forward, for example, suggesting the date of canon's composition as early as 1680. Rediscovery and rise to fame. The canon was first published in 1919 by scholar Gustav Beckmann, who included the score in his article on Pachelbel's chamber music. His research was inspired and supported by earlier music scholar and editor Max Seifert, who in 1929 published his arrangement of the Canon and Giguet in his Organum series. However, that edition contained numerous articulation marks and dynamics not in the original score. Furthermore, Seifert provided tempi he considered right for the piece, but that were not supported by later research. The canon was first recorded in 1940 by Arthur Fiedler. In 1968, the Jean-François Packard Chamber Orchestra made a recording of the piece that would change its fortunes significantly. This rendition was done in a more romantic style, at a significantly slower tempo than it had been played at before, and contained obligato parts, written by Packard, that are now closely associated with the piece. The Packard recording was released in France by Ariete Records as part of an LP that also included the trumpet concerto by Johann Friedrich Fasch, and other works by Pachelbel and Fasch, all played by the Jean-François Packard Chamber Orchestra. The Canon was also included on a widely distributed album by the mail-order label Musical Heritage Society in 1968. In 1970, a classical radio station in San Francisco played the Packard recording and became inundated by listener requests. The piece gained growing fame, particularly in California. In 1974, London Records, aware of the interest in the piece, reissued a 1961 album of the Corellier Christmas Concerto performed by the Stuttgart Chamber Orchestra, which happened to contain the piece, now retitled to Pachelbel Canon, the record that made it famous and other Baroque favorites. The album was the highest-selling classical album of 1976. Its success led to many other record labels issuing their own recordings of the work, many of which also sold well. In 1977, the RCA Red Seal label reissued the original Erito album in the United States and elsewhere. In the U.S., it was the sixth highest-selling classical album of 1977. The Packard recording was then featured prominently in the soundtrack of the 1980 film, Ordinary People. The Ariete RCA album kept climbing the Billboard Classical Albums chart, and in January 1982 it reached the #1 position, where it remained until May 1982, when it was knocked out of first place by an album featuring Pachelbel's Canon played by the Academy of Ancient Music directed by Christopher Hogwitt. In 1982, pianist George Winston included his variations on the Canon by Johann Pachelbel on his solo piano album December, which has sold over 3 million copies. That same year, the magazine The New Yorker published a cartoon titled Prisoner of Pachelbel, in which a prisoner hears over the loudspeaker, "For your listening pleasure, we once again present Pachelbel's Canon." The 1991 musical parody album WTWP Classical Talk, a T-Talk Radio by P.D. Q. Bach is set at a fictional radio station whose call letters stand for Wall-to-Wall Pachelbel. Analysis. Pachelbel's Canon combines the techniques of canon and ground bass. Canon is a polyphonic device in which several voices play the same music, entering in sequence. In Pachelbel's piece, there are 3 voices engaged in canon, but there is also a 4th voice, the basso continuo, which plays an independent part. The bass voice keeps repeating the same 2-bar line throughout the piece. The common musical term for this is ostinato, or ground bass. The 8 chords suggested by the bass are represented in the table below. In Germany, Italy, and France of the 17th century, some pieces built on ground bass were called chansons or passacaglia. Such ground bass work sometimes incorporates some form of variation in the upper voices, while some writers consider each of the 28 statements of the ground bass a separate variation. One scholar finds that Pachelbel's Canon is constructed of just 12 variations, mostly 4 bars in length, and describes them as follows: quarter notes, 8th notes, 16th notes, leaping quarter notes, rest, 32nd note pattern on scalar melody, staccato, 8th notes and rests, 16th note extensions of melody with upper neighbor notes, repetitive 16th note patterns, dotted rhythms and 16th note patterns on upper neighbor notes, syncopated quarter and 8th notes rhythm. eighth note octave leaps. Pachelbel's canon thus merges a strict polyphonic form and a variation form. Pachelbel skillfully constructs the variations to make them both pleasing and subtly undetectable. Influence on popular music. In 2002, pop music producer Pete Waterman described Canon in D as almost the godfather of pop music because we've all used it in our own ways for the past 30 years. He also said that Kylie Minogue's 1988 UK #1 hit single, I Should Be So Lucky, which Waterman co-wrote and co-produced, was based on Canon in D. The Farm's 1990 single, All Together Now, has its chord sequence lifted directly from Pachelbel's canon. The Pet Shop Boys' 1993 cover of Go West played up that song's resemblance to both Pachelbel's canon and the Soviet anthem. Coolio's 1997 See You When You Get There is built around a sample of the piece. Other songs that make use of the Pachelbel's canon chord progression include Rain and Tears by Aphrodite's Child, Streets of London by Ralph McTell, Basket Case by Green Day, Don't Look Back in Anger by Oasis, and Graduation by Vitamin C. In 2014, the UK-based cooperative Funeral Care compiled a list of the most popular classical, contemporary and religious music across 30,000 funerals. Canon in D was at position 2 in the classical chart and overall position 11 and remains popular. The Trans-Siberian Orchestra's 1998 song Christmas Canon is set to the tune of Pachelbel's canon. The second half of Brian Eno's album Discreet in Music features 3 variations on the canon in D major by Johann Pachelbel, whose titles were derived from inaccurate French to English translations of the liner notes of a version of Pachelbel's canon.